What if everything you know about Game of Thrones is a lie? The greatest secrets of Westeros were never revealed on screen. They lie buried in forgotten texts, waiting to be discovered. Rhaegar Targaryen didn't kidnap Lyanna Stark. They were in love. But that's just the beginning. What if Rhaegar had won at the Trident? What if Lyanna survived childbirth? And what dark pact did the Night's King make with the White Walkers that nobody wants you to know about? I've uncovered 18 shocking theories that change everything we thought we knew about the world of ice and fire. Some were deliberately erased from history. Others hide in plain sight, their true meaning obscured by those who fear the truth. Why? Was House Greystark completely annihilated when the Boltons were repeatedly forgiven for worse crimes? What is the true purpose of the Faceless Men, and did they cause the doom of Valyria? And most disturbing of all, what if Tyrion Lannister is actually the Mad King's son? The Masters don't want these theories known. The powerful have worked for centuries to keep these secrets buried. But tonight, I break my vows of silence. These forbidden manuscripts reveal the hidden truths behind the greatest mysteries of Westeros. And once you know them, you'll never see Game of Thrones the same way again. Theory 1. The Trident's other tide, Rhaegar's reign, and the prophecy's cost. Had the last dragon's son prevailed that day, the realm might have traded one war for another more terrible still. The image of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen falling beneath Robert Baratheon's warhammer at the Ruby Ford stands as one of the most consequential moments in recent history. The death of the Silver Prince sealed the fate of a dynasty that had ruled for nearly 3 centuries. But what if the tide of battle had turned differently? What if Rhaegar's blade had found Robert's heart instead? A victorious Rhaegar would have faced a realm still in chaos. His first and most pressing challenge would not have been reconciliation with the rebel houses, but confronting the madness that sat upon the Iron Throne, his own father, King Aerys. And who? The prince had already been contemplating the necessity of removing his father from power before he ever met Lyanna Stark. As Lord Tywin once observed to his son Jaime, "When the battle's done, I mean to call a council. Changes will be made. I meant to do it long ago, but, well, it does no good to speak of roads not taken." Such a council, convened by Rhaegar after defeating Robert, would have placed him in the position of both savior and usurper, a son forced to depose his own father for the good of the realm. This act, however justified, would have stained the beginning of his reign with the taint of kinslaying and established a dangerous precedent. The Kingsguard, bound by sacred oaths to protect Aerys, would have faced an impossible choice: honor their vows to the father, or follow the son who would save the kingdom. More problematic still would have been the question of Lyanna Stark and the child she bore him, Jon Snow. Rhaegar, consumed by prophecy and the belief that the dragon must have 3 heads, had already set aside his lawful wife, Princess Elia Martell of Dorne, in all but name. To legitimize Jon as the prince that was promised, Rhaegar might have attempted to formalize a second marriage to Lyanna Stark, an act unprecedented since Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives. Such a decision would have fractured the realm anew. Dorne, already nursing grievances over Elia's treatment, would have viewed this as the ultimate insult. Prince Doran and the formidable Red Viper would never have accepted Jon's legitimacy over the rights of Elia's children, Rhaenys and Aegon. The Faith of the Seven, with its strict prohibitions against polygamy, would have denounced the union as unholy. Meanwhile, the North would have remained trapped in an impossible position. While Lyanna might have gone willingly with Rhaegar, her brothers and father had still died horrible deaths at Aerys's command. Would the proud lords of the North bend the knee to the son of the man who burned their liege lord alive? Would they accept Lyanna's choice when it had cost thousands of northern lives? The rebellion rather than ending with Robert's victory, might have merely transformed into a more complex and fractured conflict. The realm would have split between those loyal to Rhaegar's vision, those demanding justice for Aerys's crimes, those championing Elya's children, and those supporting Jon's claim. The prophetic obsession that drove Rhaegar to Lyanna in the first place would have become the fatal flaw that undid his reign before it truly began. As Maester Yandel wrote in his suppressed drafts of The World of Ice and Fire, prophecy is like a treacherous woman. She takes your member in her mouth and you moan with the pleasure of it and think, how sweet, how fine, how good this is. And then her teeth snap shut and your moans turn to screams. Rhaegar's victory at the Trident might have spared the realm from Robert's rule, but it would have birthed new conflicts potentially more devastating than those it prevented. A sobering reminder that even the noblest intentions can pave the road to catastrophe. Theory 2. The winter rose unbroken, Lyanna's survival and the hidden kingdom. Some secrets are too dangerous to die with their keepers. Few deaths have shaped the course of recent history more profoundly than that of Lyanna Stark in the Tower of Joy. Her passing not only cemented Robert Baratheon's hatred of all things Targaryen, but also forced her brother Eddard to bear a burden of secrecy that would haunt him until his own execution. But what if Lyanna had not died of childbirth fever? What if she had survived to see her son's first smile, to hear his first words? Eddard Stark, arriving at the Tower of Joy to find his sister weakened but alive with her newborn son, would have faced an even more impossible dilemma than the one history records. Robert Baratheon's hatred for Rhaegar Targaryen had only intensified after the prince's death. "In my dreams, I kill him every night," Robert confessed years later. That hatred extended to all Targaryens, even children, as evidenced by his approval of the murders of Princess Rhaenys and Prince Aegon. Lyanna, fiercely willful and protective of her child, would never have agreed to wed Robert knowing he would destroy her son. Nor would she have consented to passing Jon off as a bastard while she took her place as Robert's queen. The she-wolf of Winterfell would have demanded her child's safety and recognition. Faced with this impossible situation, Eddard might have orchestrated a desperate deception. Perhaps he arranged for Lyanna and her infant son to be secreted away to the remote swamps of the Neck, to Greywater Watch, the mysterious moving castle of House Reed. Howland Reed, the only other survivor of the Tower of Joy battle, was known for his absolute loyalty to Ned Stark. The crannogmen of the Neck keep to themselves, rarely venturing into the wider world, making their lands the perfect hiding place. This theory explains several curiosities. First, why Howland Reed never appeared at Winterfell during the events we know, despite his close bond with Ned. Second, why Ned seemed to bear an even heavier burden than merely raising his sister's son as a bastard. He was maintaining a far more dangerous secret, that Lyanna lived. Third, it accounts for the strange loyalty of House Reed to the Stark cause, even sending Howland's own children, Meera and Jojen, to protect Bran Stark after Ned's death. The ramifications of such a scenario are profound. A living Lyanna and a hidden Jon Snow, the trueborn son of Rhaegar, would represent a constant threat to Robert's rule. This knowledge would explain Ned's adamant opposition to Robert's plan to assassinate Daenerys Targaryen. It wasn't just abstract moral principles at stake, but the precedent of killing Targaryen children that threatened his own sister and nephew. More intriguingly, it raises the possibility that over time, a small network of loyalists might have formed around this hidden Targaryen heir. The northern lords who keep to the old ways, who remember when the kings of winter ruled, might have been slowly brought into this conspiracy. This could explain why, generations later, northern houses declared so readily for the king in the north, despite centuries of Targaryen and then Baratheon rule. Perhaps they knew more than they revealed about the true heritage of the blood flowing through the Stark line. Lyanna's survival, therefore, would not have been merely a personal matter, but the seed of a slow-growing challenge to the Iron Throne, a hidden kingdom waiting for the proper moment to emerge from the shadows. Theory 3. The Whispers of the Rat Cook. The True. Betrayal at the Night Fort. Not all monsters are born of darkness. Some are forged from broken promises. Among the most chilling tales told in the north is that of the Rat Cook, who served an Andal king his own son baked in a pie. The gods, it is said, did not punish the cook for murder, but for violating the sacred law of guest right. This tale, repeated through generations, speaks to the northern reverence for hospitality laws, and perhaps hints at deeper, darker truths about another infamous figure, the Night's King. The 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch is remembered as a figure of pure evil, a man who took a woman with skin as white as the moon and eyes like blue stars as his bride, and declared himself king of the Night Fort. Old Nan's tales tell us he made sacrifices to the others during his 13-year reign. But what if these sacrifices were not acts of worship or evil, but the desperate fulfillment of an ancient pact? Consider what we know of Craster, the wildling who gave his sons to the cold gods and in return was left in peace while other wildlings suffered and died. His sacrifices maintained a grim equilibrium, a twisted form of guest right with the others. What if the Night's King's reign of terror was something similar but on a larger scale? Perhaps after the long night ended, the others did not simply retreat in defeat. Maybe they agreed to withdraw beyond the wall in exchange for regular tribute, sacrifices to sustain them in the frozen wastes. The Night's King, through his marriage to a female other, might have become the intermediary responsible for maintaining this pact. His atrocities could have been the collection and offering of these terrible tributes, perhaps children, like Craster's sons, or condemned men from the Watch. While monstrous by our standards, in his mind, these acts were the necessary price for keeping the others at bay, preventing another long night from engulfing the world. This reinterpretation casts the actions of Brandon the Breaker and Jorah Moon in a different light. Their celebrated overthrow of the Night's King may have been an act of moral righteousness from one perspective, but from another, it shattered a dark but necessary covenant. The Night's King was not destroyed because he made sacrifices to the others, but because he upheld a pact that others found too horrifying to bear. The erasure of the Night's King's name from history, and that very name is cursed, Old Nan insisted, might not have been solely to condemn his evil, but to bury the terrible truth, that in destroying him, the realms of men broke faith with the others. This betrayal of guest right, this violation of a sworn agreement, could be the true reason the others have returned after thousands of years. Just as the Rat Cook was cursed for violating sacred laws of hospitality, perhaps the others come again to exact vengeance for an ancient promise broken. This would transform our understanding of their motivations, not mindless evil, but a cold, implacable sense of justice, demanding what they believe is rightfully theirs after millennia of patient waiting. As we explore these three alternative histories, a common theme emerges: the profound and often tragic consequences of choices made in moments of crisis. Whether Rhaegar's prophetic obsession, Ned's desperate protection of his sister, or the Night's King's terrible bargain, each represents a decision made in extremis that echoed through generations, shaping the world in ways both seen and unseen. History is not what happened, but what is remembered, and how it is remembered shapes what is yet to come. Theory 4. Lightbringer's true form. A pact forged in sacrifice, not a sword. The greatest weapons are not forged in fire, but in the breaking of hearts throughout the eastern lands, from the Shadowlands beyond Ashai to the secret temples of Volantis. Priests and priestesses of R'hllor speak of Azor Ahai reborn and the coming of Lightbringer. This prophecy centers on a hero who will draw a burning sword from fire to combat the darkness. The tale of the original Lightbringer is haunting in its terrible beauty. Azor Ahai labored for 100 days and nights to forge a hero's blade. Twice he failed. On his third attempt, he knew what he must do. He called for his wife, Nissa, and when she came to him, he thrust the blade through her living heart. Her cry of anguish and ecstasy left a crack across the face of the moon, but her soul became one with the steel, creating Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes. Most interpretations of this prophecy envision Lightbringer as a literal flaming sword. But what if our understanding is too narrow? What if Lightbringer is not a physical weapon at all? Consider the pattern of Azor Ahai's forging attempts. The first sword, tempered in water, shattered. The second, thrust into the heart of a lion, broke again. Only the third, tempered with his beloved's soul, succeeded. This progression reveals a principle of blood magic. The power derived correlates directly to the value of the sacrifice. Water has no inherent magical potency. A lion's life holds power, but it lacks the profound personal connection that fuels the deepest sorcery. Only Nissa's willing sacrifice, born of love and completed in agony, was sufficient. This suggests that Lightbringer may represent something far more profound than mere steel and flame. Perhaps it symbolizes a magical pact or covenant of immense power sealed through the ultimate sacrifice. In many magical traditions, blood serves as both catalyst and binding agent. The voluntary offering of a loved one's life force could forge a bond between realms, creating a channel through which tremendous power might flow. Alternatively, Lightbringer could represent a child, a living vessel born from the union of fire and sacrifice. The phrase, "wake dragons from stone," might refer not to literal petrified eggs, but to the awakening of dormant magical bloodlines. Throughout history, many cultures have practiced sacrifice to ensure fertility and rebirth. The terrible price paid by Nissa might have been the necessary catalyst for creating a bloodline with unique properties, perhaps the very Valyrian Dragonlord lineage itself. This interpretation transforms Azor Ahai from a warrior with a magic sword into something far more complex, a sorcerer king who paid the ultimate price to forge a power that could stand against the Great Other. It suggests that the coming battle against darkness will require not simply martial prowess, but a willingness to make devastating personal sacrifices, to give up what one loves most for the greater good. The red comet seen across the sky, interpreted by some as heralding Azor Ahai's return, may signal not the coming of a particular individual, but the moment when such a sacrifice becomes possible again, when the stars align to permit the forging of a new pact between the living and the forces beyond. This reading of the prophecy casts a shadow over those proclaimed as potential saviors. If Lightbringer comes at such a terrible cost, who among the living would willingly pay it? Who would sacrifice their Nissa? And what kind of world would such a blood-soaked salvation create? Theory 5, the Valonqar's shadow, Cersei's self-fulfilling, doom and the faceless men. Those who stare too long at shadows often fail to see the blade in the light. Queen Cersei Lannister has been haunted throughout her adult life by the prophecy of Maggie the Frog, encountered during her childhood in the woods beyond Casterly Rock. This prophecy accurately foretold her marriage to the king, Robert's infidelities, and that she would have 3 children whose deaths she would mourn. But the most chilling aspect was its conclusion. And when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you. Valonqar is High Valyrian for little brother, and Cersei has always believed this referred to Tyrion, her younger dwarf brother whom she has loathed since birth. Her fear and hatred of Tyrion have driven many of her most destructive actions, from falsely accusing him of attempting to murder Bran Stark to orchestrating his trial for Joffrey's assassination. But what if her interpretation is flawed? What if her very fixation on Tyrion has blinded her to the prophecy's true meaning? The term Valonqar could apply to Jaime as well, her twin-born moments after her, technically making him her little brother too. Yet, there are more subtle possibilities that merit consideration. Perhaps the Valonqar is not her literal brother at all, but an instrument of fate connected to her obsession with destroying Tyrion. Consider the faceless men of Braavos, the legendary guild of assassins who serve the many-faced god of death. These killers possess the supernatural ability to change their faces, assuming new identities to approach their targets undetected. They accept contracts for a price, sometimes monetary, sometimes more personal. What if Cersei's relentless persecution of Tyrion eventually drives someone to contact this guild? Perhaps Tyrion himself in exile, or someone who loves him, or even someone with a separate grievance against Cersei, who sees opportunity in her vulnerability. A faceless man wearing a stranger's features could gain access to the Queen where others could not. The hands around her pale white throat need not belong to her actual brother, but could be the hands of an assassin acting on Tyrion's behalf, the Valonqar's instrument rather than the Valonqar himself. Alternatively, the assassin might wear Jaime's face taken after his death, allowing the prophecy to be fulfilled in the most literal and yet unexpected manner. This interpretation underscores the cruel irony of prophecy in the world of ice and fire. Often, it is our attempts to prevent a foretold doom that drive us inexorably toward it. Cersei's paranoid fear of Tyrion has made her enemies of those who might have been allies, alienated her from her remaining family, and created the very conditions that could lead to her prophesied death. There is a deeper philosophical question here about the nature of fate. If Cersei's death comes at the hands of a faceless man, someone who is both no one and potentially anyone, what does this tell us about the agency of individuals versus the immutable flow of destiny? Is prophecy truly fixed, or do we create our fates through our responses to foreknowledge? As the spider Lord Varys once observed, ofttimes a very small man can cast a very large shadow. Perhaps it is the shadow of the Valonqar, rather than the Valonqar himself, that Cersei should truly fear. Theory 6. The Hidden Dragon's Vein. Serra, Varys, and the female Blackfire legacy. Not all dragons breathe fire. Some hide their scales beneath silk and secrets. The Blackfire Rebellions, a series of uprisings led by the descendants of Aegon IV's legitimized bastard demon Blackfire, officially ended with the death of Maelys the Monstrous on the Stepstones. During the War of the Ninepenny Kings, with his fall, House Blackfire was declared extinct in the male line. But what of the female line? History records that Demon Blackfire had several daughters, yet their fates remain largely unchronicled. A curious omission in the typically thorough accounts of Targaryen succession disputes. This theory proposes that the Blackfire lineage did not die with Maelys, but continued through female descendants who escaped the Targaryen purges by disguising their heritage and fleeing across the Narrow Sea. Furthermore, two key players in the current Game of Thrones may be connected to this hidden lineage: Varys the Spider and Illyrio Mopatis, the wealthy magister of Pentos. Let us consider Illyrio's mysterious deceased wife, Serra. She is described with striking features: pale golden hair streaked with silver and large blue eyes, hallmarks of Valyrian blood. Illyrio speaks of her with unusual tenderness, for a man known primarily for his mercantile cunning. Serra, I found her in a Lysine pleasure house and brought her home to warm my bed, but in the end, I wedded her. His devotion to her memory seems to transcend mere affection for a beautiful bed-warmer-turned wife. What if Serra was more than she appeared? What if she carried the blood of House Blackfire, perhaps descended from one of Daemon's daughters or granddaughters? This would explain Illyrio's extraordinary investment in a scheme to place young Griff, presented as Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar, on the Iron Throne. If young Griff is actually Illyrio's son by Serra, then he represents not a Targaryen, restoration but a Blackfire ascension, cloaked in the legitimacy of the main Targaryen line. This brings us to Varys, whose origins remain shrouded in mystery. The eunuch claims to have been born a slave in Lys, where Valyrian features are common due to the city's founding as a pleasure garden for dragon lords. Yet his exceptional rise from street urchin to master of whisperers suggests connections or capabilities beyond those of an ordinary commoner. What if Varys too shares this hidden Blackfire blood? Perhaps he and Serra were related, cousins or even siblings separated in childhood. This would transform his decades-long scheming from the inscrutable machinations of a devotee of the realm to something far more personal, a multi-generational plan to avenge historic wrongs and place his family's blood back on the Iron Throne. The involvement of the Golden Company provides compelling supporting evidence. Founded by Igor Bittersteel Rivers, another of Aegon IV's great bastards and Daemon Blackfire's half-brother, this mercenary company has long been associated with Blackfire ambitions. Their unprecedented breaking of a contract to support young Griff suggests loyalties deeper than gold. Their battle cry, "Beneath the gold, the bitter steel," hints at a core purpose hidden beneath their mercenary facade. If this theory holds true, the current struggle for the Iron Throne contains an invisible dimension. The final gambit of a house long thought extinct, using deception and misdirection to reclaim what they believe was stolen from them generations ago. The irony is exquisite. The supposed Targaryen restoration, championed by the realm's greatest spy master, would actually be the culmination of the Blackfire rebellion, achieved not through open war, but through layers of carefully constructed falsehoods. As Archmaster Marwyn once said, perhaps no single weapon is as deadly as a well-placed lie. Theory 7. The Lion's illegitimate cub. Tyrion, Aerys, and Joanna's silent suffering. Some children bear the weight of histories they never knew were theirs. Few relationships in the Seven Kingdoms are as fraught with hatred as that between Tywin Lannister and his youngest son Tyrion. Tywin's contempt transcends mere disappointment in an imperfect heir. It burns with a personal venom that seems disproportionate even to Tyrion's role in Joanna Lannister's death during childbirth. Tywin's dying words, you are no son of mine," hint at a darker truth that may have poisoned their relationship from its inception. This theory suggests that Tyrion is not Tywin's biological son at all, but rather the product of King Aerys II. Targaryen's obsession with Joanna Lannister, Tywin's beloved wife. The evidence, while circumstantial, is compelling. Aerys's inappropriate interest in Joanna was well documented. During Tywin and Joanna's wedding feast, Aerys drunkenly lamented the abolition of the Lord's right to the first night and took liberties during the bedding ceremony that left Tywin furious. Years later, when Joanna returned to court for the celebration of Aerys's 10th year on the throne in 272 AC, the king asked if her breasts had been ruined by nursing her twins, humiliating both Joanna and Tywin. What the histories do not explicitly record, but courtiers of the era whispered, was that Aerys's obsession with Joanna may have gone beyond crude remarks. The Mad King was known for taking what he wanted, with little regard for consequences. If Aerys forced himself upon Joanna during her visit to King's Landing, or even engaged in a consensual affair born of complex court politics, Tyrion could be the result of that union. This would explain several curious aspects of Tyrion's story. First, Tywin's implacable hatred makes perfect sense if he knew or suspected that Tyrion was Aerys's bastard, a living reminder of his wife's violation or infidelity, and his own greatest humiliation. "Men's laws give you the right to bear my name and display my colors," Tywin once told Tyrion, "since I cannot prove that you are not mine." Second, Tyrion's appearance contains hints of Targaryen ancestry. While his mismatched eyes and stunted stature could be mere quirks of nature, they might also result from the mingling of Lannister and Targaryen blood, a combination not seen before. The ancient Valyrians were known for unusual eye colors, and Targaryen children born of problematic unions sometimes displayed physical abnormalities. Third, Tyrion's lifelong fascination with dragons seems more than casual interest. "When I was your age, I used to dream of having a dragon of my own," he tells young Griff. Oh yes, even a stunted, twisted little boy can look down on the world when he's seated on a dragon's back. Most intriguingly, if Tyrion is indeed Aerys's a son, it places him in the company of other potential dragon seeds, like Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen, fulfilling the prophecy that the dragon has 3 heads. It would make him, unknowingly, a claimant to the very throne he served as Hand, and it would transform his killing of Tywin from mere patricide into something more complex, the elimination of the man who had usurped the role of his father while despising him for his true parentage. The cruelest irony in this scenario is that Tywin Lannister, who famously declared that the house that puts family first will always defeat the house that puts the whims and wishes of its sons and daughters first, may have spent his life raising a child of his greatest enemy, unable to disown him without admitting his wife's dishonor or his own inability to protect her. If true, this theory reframes Tyrion's journey as one of unconscious reclamation, a hidden dragon gradually shedding the lion's skin that never truly fit, moving inexorably toward a destiny neither he nor his supposed father could have imagined. Blood calls to blood across the void of time, whispering secrets that ink and parchment cannot capture. The Azor, Ahai contenders. The prophecy of Azor Ahai. Reborn has inspired much scholarly debate, with multiple candidates showing partial fulfillment of the criteria. Jon Snow's claim begins with his birth, potentially surrounded by tears at the Tower of Joy representing salt, while the battle smoke lingered outside. The sword Dawn, made from a fallen star, was present at his birth. While he hasn't awakened literal dragons, his potential Targaryen heritage connects him to dragonkind. Longclaw, his Valyrian steel sword, might serve as his lightbringer. Having already lost Ygritte, Jon understands the pain of sacrificing love, though a greater sacrifice may yet await him. Daenerys Targaryen presents perhaps the strongest case. Born on storm-racked Dragonstone providing the salt, while Drogo's funeral pyre offers the smoke. The red comet blazed overhead as her dragons hatched. She literally woke dragons from stone eggs, fulfilling that aspect perfectly. Her dragons themselves might be her lightbringer, weapons of fire against the coming darkness. In sacrificing both Drogo and her unborn son Rhaego, she has already paid a terrible price, though prophecy may demand more. Stannis Baratheon's claim rests largely on Melisandre's interpretation. His connection to Dragonstone provides the salt, while her ritual fires offer smoke. No clear bleeding star marked his emergence. He has no connection to actual dragons. His glowing sword, while impressive, appears to be merely glamored by Melisandre's magic, rather than truly forged through sacrifice. His willingness to sacrifice Edric Storm and later Shireen suggests he would pay the price, but his understanding of what's required seems fundamentally flawed. Beric Dondarrion lacks connection to the prophecy's birth elements. However, his flaming sword, ignited by his own blood, echoes Lightbringer in a limited way. More significantly, his repeated resurrections represent sacrifice in service to a greater purpose. His willingness to give his final life to restore another suggests the selflessness the prophecy may ultimately require. Jaime Lannister, while rarely considered, presents intriguing possibilities. With no obvious birth connections, his claim would rest on transformation rather than origin. His complex relationship with Cersei and growing bond with Brienne create potential for a devastating choice that might forge something new from his broken honor. The loss of his sword hand forced him to forge a new identity, much as Azor Ahai's first attempts at creating Lightbringer failed before success. The fragmentary nature of prophecy makes definitive identification impossible. Perhaps Azor Ahai is not a single individual, but a collective role shared among multiple figures, each fulfilling different aspects of the prophecy. Or perhaps the true prince that was promised remains hidden, waiting for the moment when darkness rises and light must answer. Theory 8. The Price of Godhood, the Faceless Men and the Valyrian Slave Revolt. The first gift was given to end suffering. What greater suffering existed than that of the slaves beneath the 14 flames? The doom of Valyria, the cataclysmic destruction of the freehold in a single day of fire and ash, remains one of history's greatest mysteries. While maesters generally attribute it to natural causes, citing the volatile volcanic nature of the 14 flames, certain disturbing patterns suggest a more deliberate hand in this apocalypse. The kindly man of the House of Black and White in Braavos tells a revealing origin story of the Faceless Men. They began, he says, in the volcanic mines beneath Valyria, where slaves from 100 lands toiled in unimaginable heat and misery. These slaves prayed to their various gods for relief, and eventually one slave realized that all these seemingly different deities were but faces of a single god, him of many faces, the god of death. This first faceless man began granting the gift of death to the most suffering slaves. Eventually, he gave this gift to some of the masters as well. This account is typically interpreted as describing individual mercy killings and assassinations. But what if it hints at something far more momentous? Consider, the Faceless Men are not merely skilled killers, but practitioners of a profound and terrible magic. Their ability to take on the faces and identities of others represents a power beyond conventional understanding. What if, over generations, these slave assassins developed not just their face-changing abilities, but a deeper comprehension of blood magic and its potential? The Valyrians themselves were masters of blood magic, using it to tame dragons and create the network of roads and structures that defined their empire. The slaves who worked the mines would have observed these practices firsthand, perhaps learning secrets their masters never intended to share. Over decades or centuries, the early Faceless Men might have devised a ritual of unprecedented scale, a coordinated sacrifice of thousands of willing slaves, their deaths dedicated to the many-faced god in exchange for the power to strike down their oppressors. The 14 flames themselves, those volatile volcanoes that powered Valyrian sorcery, could have served as the perfect conduit for this terrible magic. Imagine it, on a single day, at a predetermined hour, thousands of slaves taking their own, lives in a synchronized ritual of vengeance, their combined deaths creating a surge of magical energy that overwhelmed the spells containing the 14 flames. The Valyrian sorcerers, caught unaware by this invisible attack from within, would have been powerless to restore control as their own volcanic engines of power turned against them. This theory transforms the doom from a natural disaster into an act of terrible justice, the culmination of the greatest slave revolt in history, executed not with swords and spears, but with sacrificial knives and forbidden knowledge. It explains why the doom was so complete and why no warning signs were heeded. It also explains why the Faceless Men became what they are, a guild of assassins serving death, the god who gave them vengeance when no other would. Daenerys the Dreamer's prophetic vision of the doom, which prompted House Targaryen to flee to Dragonstone 12 years before the catastrophe, might not have foretold a natural calamity, but the culmination of this long-planned magical rebellion. Her dreams may have shown her not erupting volcanoes, but the faces of thousands of slaves turned toward their masters with death in their eyes. If this theory is correct, it carries profound implications for our understanding of magic and history. It suggests that even the mightiest civilization can be brought low, not by external enemies, but by those they oppress. It implies that the price of certain kinds of power is always paid eventually, no matter how long the debt remains outstanding. And it hints that the Faceless Men may be far more than hired killers. They may be the inheritors of a terrible magical tradition born in fire and vengeance, capable of toppling empires when properly motivated. As the kindly man told Arya Stark, "Valar Morghulis, all men must die." Perhaps the Valyrians forgot this truth in their pride, believing their magic made them more than men. The Faceless Men reminded them otherwise. Theory 9, the Abyssal Song, Valyria's power siphoned from an eldritch entity. There are things that swim in the darkness beneath the world, older than dragons, older than gods. They sleep, but they do not die. The unparalleled magical abilities of the Valyrians have long puzzled scholars. How did a simple shepherding folk rise to command dragons and build an empire unrivaled in history? The conventional explanation, that they discovered dragons in the 14 Flames and gradually learned to tame them, seems incomplete when one considers the full scope of their accomplishments. Valyrian sorcery went far beyond dragon taming. They created the indestructible Valyrian roads that still crisscross their former domains. They forged steel no modern smith can replicate. They raised buildings that defied natural law. Most impressively, they somehow controlled the 14 Flames themselves, a chain of volatile volcanoes that eventually destroyed them when that control failed. This theory proposes a more disturbing source for Valyrian power, that beneath the peninsula lay something ancient and incomprehensible, an eldritch entity whose power the Valyrians learned to harness, perhaps initially by accident and later with deliberate, terrible purpose. Throughout the known world, certain structures and artifacts hint at civilizations predating even the Dawn Age. Most notable are the strange, oily black stone formations found in diverse locations. The base of the High Tower in Old Town, the ancient maze-like city of Lorath, the mysterious sea stone chair of the Iron Islands, and most significantly, the entire city of Ashai by the Shadow. This substance appears indestructible, slightly greasy to the touch, and somehow wrong in ways observers struggle to articulate. What if the Valyrian Peninsula itself was constructed upon a massive foundation of this same black stone? A prison, or conduit for some primordial entity? The early Valyrians, digging into the 14 Flames, might have breached ancient seals or protections, making contact with this slumbering presence. Through blood sacrifice and dragon magic, they might have learned to draw power from it without fully releasing it. This relationship could explain several mysteries. First, the unnatural potency of Valyrian magic, which exceeded anything seen before or since. Second, the strange, often disturbing results of their experimentations, such as the slave races they allegedly created in their blood magic pits. Third, the peculiar mental bond between dragon lords and their mounts, which might have been facilitated by contact with this elder consciousness. Most compelling is the account of Princess Aerea Targaryen, who disappeared with the dragon Balerion only, to return to King's Landing months later in a horrifying state. Septon Barth recorded that her body was infested with worms with faces and snakes with hands, while her blood was described as boiling with internal heat. Balerion himself returned wounded, suggesting that whatever power dwelled in Valeria's ruins was formidable enough to injure the Black Dread. The doom itself takes on new significance in this context. The oft-repeated refrain that the Valerians dug too deep might be literally true. Perhaps in their insatiable hunger for power, they finally broke through to the entity's core or violated some fundamental boundary that had maintained the equilibrium of their relationship. The cataclysm that followed would not have been merely volcanic, but a catastrophic awakening or reaction from this abyssal power. This theory casts the Valyrians not as the pinnacle of human achievement, but as reckless sorcerers who built their civilization upon a terrible bargain with forces beyond comprehension. Their downfall becomes not a natural disaster, but the inevitable consequence of their hubris, a terrible lesson in the dangers of seeking power without understanding its source or price. The smoking ruins of Valyria, still deadly to explorers 4 centuries after the doom, may be avoided not just because of tectonic instability or lingering poisons, but because something remains awake there. Something that reached up from the abyss when its prison was broken and transformed a paradise into a hell. As Archmaester Marwyn once observed, Valyria was built with spells as well as stone. The old powers awakened by their blood magic still linger, and there are worse things than stone dragons slumbering in the smoking hills. Theory 10. The Night's King's Bargain, a pact of sacrifice to hold back eternal winter. Winter was not defeated in the battle for the dawn. It was merely appeased. The long night, a generation of darkness when the White Walkers swept down from the uttermost north, bringing cold and death in their wake, is remembered as the greatest threat humanity has ever faced. According to legend, it ended when the last hero, aided by the children of the forest, pushed back the others, and Brandon the Builder raised the wall to keep them at bay. This straightforward narrative of victory and containment is satisfying but potentially incomplete. The question remains, why did the others retreat? Were they truly defeated, or was there another reason for their withdrawal? This theory, building upon our earlier exploration of the Night's King, proposes that the long night did not end in absolute victory for humanity, but in a negotiated peace, a terrible pact sealed in blood and sacrifice. The last hero's journey, as described in fragmentary accounts, tells of him seeking the children of the forest after all his companions died. What if their aid came with a condition? What if the price of pushing back the eternal winter was a promise of tribute, regular sacrifices to appease the others and maintain a precarious balance? In the aftermath of this pact, the wall was raised, not just to keep the others out, but to demarcate the boundary of the agreement. The Night's Watch, initially, may have served not only as guardians against the others, but as administrators of this grim covenant, ensuring the required sacrifices were provided over generations. As the immediate terror of the long night faded into legend, the true purpose of these sacrifices might have become obscured or deliberately forgotten. The Night's King, the 13th Lord Commander who took another as his bride, might have been attempting to formalize or strengthen this ancient arrangement, perhaps even humanize it through his union with one of the very beings their sacrifices. Appeased, his reign of terror at the Night Fort, where he made sacrifices to the others, could represent not madness or evil, but a terrible faithfulness to the original pact. His overthrow by Brandon the Breaker and Joramun would then be cast in a different light, not as heroes destroying a monster, but as men rejecting an unbearable truth, breaking faith with powers they no longer wish to appease. This theory helps explain several persistent mysteries. First, why the others have returned now, after thousands of years. Perhaps the accumulated weight of broken promises has finally triggered their vengeance. Second, why knowledge of the others and their nature seems so fragmentary in Westeros, despite their existential threat. The truth was deliberately suppressed as too terrible to bear. Third, why Craster's sacrifice of his sons seems to buy him immunity beyond the wall. He maintains in microcosm the very pact that the realm as a whole abandoned. Most provocatively, this theory suggests that the Night's King was not erased from history, merely to condemn his evil, but to bury the knowledge of what was once deemed necessary, to allow later generations to believe in an unqualified victory rather than a costly armistice. It implies that the current emergence of the others is not random, but the consequence of thousands of years of broken faith. If true, this places Jon Snow and his contemporaries in an even more difficult position than they realize. They face not just an implacable enemy, but one with a legitimate grievance, a broken contract written in blood and magic. The final resolution may require not just martial victory, but a reckoning with this ancient betrayal, perhaps even a renewal of the pact in some form, no matter how distasteful modern sensibilities might find it. As old Nan told Bran Stark, "Fear is for the winter, my little lord, when the snows fall 100 feet deep and the ice wind comes howling out of the north. Fear is for the long night, when the sun hides its face for years at a time and little children are born and live and die all in darkness." Perhaps the most fearsome aspect of winter is not the cold itself, but the price required to hold it. At bay, Theory 11. The Corpse Queen's Lament, a stolen child of winter and the other's grief. Even creatures of ice can burn with the fire of vengeance. Building upon our examination of the Night's King, this theory explores a more personal dimension. To the ancient conflict between mankind and the others, it proposes that the Night's King's union with his Corpse Queen was more than a forbidden love or dark alliance. It was a genuine attempt at bridging two worlds through the creation of a child. The descriptions of the Night's King's bride are haunting. Her skin was cold as ice, and when he gave his seed to her, he gave his soul as well. She is often presumed to be one of the others, or perhaps a human woman transformed by their magic. What if their union, forbidden though it seemed to mortal eyes, produced a child, a being of mixed heritage, part human and part other? Such a child would be unprecedented, possessing qualities of both worlds, perhaps the durability and magical affinity of the others, combined with the adaptability and emotional capacity of humanity. It might have been seen by the others as the foundation for a new understanding between the realms of ice and men, a living embodiment of peace. However, when Brandon the Breaker and Joramun overthrew the Night's King, this child, this bridge between worlds, may have been killed or, perhaps more provocatively, stolen and brought south of the wall. The Night's King's name was struck from history, his 13-year reign erased from official records, and his child either destroyed or hidden among human society. This theft or destruction would represent not just a political act, but a profound cultural transgression from the perspective of the others. If their society values offspring as intensely as many human cultures do, perhaps even more so, given their apparently limited reproduction, the loss of this unique child would be an unforgivable wound, a grief that could fuel millennia of simmering resentment. Intriguingly, some northern houses, particularly the Starks, have legends suggesting unusual origins or characteristics. "There must always be a Stark in Winterfell" is repeated with almost religious significance. The Stark connection to direwolves, creatures not seen south of the wall for centuries until the beginning of our current story, hints at ancient magical affinities. Could these be distant echoes of other blood, diluted through generations but still potent enough to manifest in skin-changing abilities and prophetic dreams? If the child of the Night's King and his corpse queen was indeed incorporated into human society, perhaps even into House Stark itself, it would create a blood connection between the Lords of Winterfell and the others, adding layers of tragic irony to their current opposition. The very house standing against the others might carry their bloodline, unknown even to themselves. This theory transforms the others' advance from a simple invasion to a complex quest for recuperation, a parent's desperate search for a stolen child or vengeance for one slain. It suggests that what humans view as an existential threat, the others might see as justified retribution for an ancient crime against their kind. The wall itself takes on additional significance in this reading, not just a defensive fortification, but a dividing line between two societies with a shared and troubled history. Its magic perhaps specifically designed to keep the others from reclaiming what they believe is rightfully theirs. As we consider this possibility, we must ask, if reconciliation were possible, what form might it take? Would acknowledgement of this ancient wrong be sufficient, or would the others demand more tangible restitution? And how might Jon Snow, who potentially carries both Stark and Targaryen blood, factor into such a resolution? Perhaps the Song of Ice and Fire is not merely about the clash between opposing elements, but about the possibility of harmony between them. A harmony briefly glimpsed in the union of the Night's King and his queen, then shattered by fear and misunderstanding waiting to be rediscovered in our present age of crisis. Theory 12. Dawn's true origin, forged not from a star, but from the first long night's despair. In the darkest hour, even starlight can become a weapon. House Dane of Starfall stands among the most ancient and storied families in Westeros, their lineage stretching back to the Dawn Age. Their most famous possession is the greatsword Dawn, a blade unlike any other in the known world. According to legend, it was forged from the heart of a fallen star, the same celestial event that gave Starfall its name. Dawn's unique properties set it apart even from Valyrian steel. Described as pale as milk glass, it appears to glow with an inner light. Unlike the hereditary tradition of most ancestral weapons, Dawn is not automatically passed from father to son. Instead, it is bestowed only upon a Dane deemed worthy, one who bears the title Sword of the Morning. This theory proposes that Dawn's true origins are more profound and significant than merely meteorite iron. It suggests that the sword was created during the first long night specifically as a weapon against the others, using magic now lost to the world. Consider the curious properties associated with Dawn. Its pale, luminous appearance stands in stark contrast to the dark, rippled pattern of Valyrian steel. If Valyrian steel represents fire magic, forged in flame and infused with blood sorcery, perhaps Dawn embodies its opposite, a blade of ice or starlight magic, but turned against the very forces of winter it resembles. The long night was a time of unprecedented darkness and despair. In such circumstances, light itself, even the faint glow of stars, would become precious beyond measure. The children of the forest, with their deep connection to nature, might have preserved the essence of starlight through their magic. The fallen star in Dane legend could reference a moment when this light was brought down to earth and given a physical form. Alternatively, the star might not refer to a meteorite at all, but to a powerful green seer or magical practitioner who sacrificed themselves to create the weapon. Many magical traditions involve the binding of spirits or souls to objects to imbue them with power. The heart of a fallen star could poetically describe the sacrifice of a beloved leader or hero, a star of hope in the darkness, whose essence became one with the blade. This would explain several curious aspects of Dawn. First, its restriction to only the most worthy bearers suggests it carries a burden or power that requires specific qualities to wield. Second, its apparent efficacy against the others, if legends are true, would make sense if it were specifically designed to combat them. Third, the unusual reverence accorded to House Dane, despite their relatively modest holdings, might stem from their role as guardians of this uniquely powerful artifact. The connection between Dawn and the prophecy of Azor Ahai deserves particular attention. Both involve weapons of light created during darkness. If Dawn was indeed forged during the first long night, could it be the original Lightbringer, its true history distorted through millennia of retellings? Or perhaps it represents a different approach to combating the darkness, a parallel tradition, separate from but complementary to the fiery magic of Ashai and the East. The tragic tale of Ashara Dane, who allegedly threw herself from the Palace Stone. Sword of Starfall after the events at the Tower of Joy gains new significance in this context. Could her suicide have been connected to some secret knowledge about Dawn and its purpose? Did she learn something about the coming winter that drove her to despair? The return of Arthur Dane's body and Dawn to Starfall by Eddard Stark might have triggered revelations too terrible to bear. If this theory holds true, Dawn may be more than a famous ancestral blade. It could be a crucial weapon in the coming battle against the others, its purpose forgotten, but its power undiminished. The next Sword of the Morning, should one arise, might play a pivotal role in the war for Dawn yet to come, as the ancient Dane words, now replaced with fallen and reborn, supposedly declared, "We herald the light when darkness falls." Theory 13. The Greystark Curse, a betrayal of blood magic and the wolf's kin. Some betrayals cut deeper than steel. They sever the very magic in the blood. House. Greystark stands as a historical footnote in the Chronicles of the North, a cautionary tale of loyalty betrayed and punishment exacted. A cadet branch of House Stark, established at the Wolf's Den to guard the mouth of the White Knife. The Greystarks joined House Bolton in rebellion against their Stark cousins, approximately 1,000 years ago. When the rebellion failed, the Greystarks were utterly destroyed, their line extinguished, and their name relegated to dusty historical texts. While such harsh justice for treason is not uncommon in Westeros, the totality of the Greystarks' destruction contrasts sharply with the Starks' treatment of House Bolton. The Boltons rebelled numerous times throughout history, flaying Stark princes and wearing their skins as cloaks, yet they were repeatedly forgiven and allowed to maintain their lands and titles. Why would a cadet branch of the Starks' own blood receive more severe punishment than their ancient enemies? This theory suggests the Greystarks committed a transgression far greater than mere political rebellion, a violation of blood magic or sacred pacts tied to their Stark heritage. The Starks of Winterfell descend from the first men and maintain the oldest traditions in Westeros. Their ancient connection to the children of the forest, the old gods, and the magical practices of the North is well documented. Scattered references suggest the Stark bloodline carries certain abilities, skin-changing, green sight, prophetic dreams, that manifest in varying degrees through generations. As a cadet branch sharing this blood, the Greystarks would have inherited these latent powers. Their betrayal might have involved the misuse of these abilities, perhaps attempting to warg into other humans against their will, a practice considered an abomination by skin changers beyond the Wall. Alternatively, they might have attempted blood magic rituals involving Stark blood, seeking to amplify their inherited powers through forbidden means. The Wolf's Den itself may be significant. Built on a hill overlooking the mouth of the White Knife, this ancient stronghold has witnessed thousands of years of history. Its deep, dank dungeons and weirwood hearttree suggest connections to the old magics. If the Wolf's Den stands on a site of particular magical potency, the Greystarks' betrayal might have involved corrupting or exploiting this power. The Stark response, complete extermination rather than mere punishment, suggests not just anger, but necessity. Perhaps the violation was so fundamental that only the elimination of every drop of Grey Stark blood could prevent further magical contamination or catastrophe. This would explain why no Grey Stark was permitted to take the Black or seek exile, options typically available even to traitors of high birth. Intriguingly, the Wolf's Den later passed to House Manderley, a family that fled the Reach and converted to the worship of the Seven rather than the old gods. Could this transfer have been deliberate, placing the ancient stronghold in the hands of those without the blood or belief system to access whatever powers lingered there? If this theory is correct, it suggests the Starks have served not just as political rulers of the North, but as guardians of ancient magical boundaries and bloodlines. Their responsibility may extend beyond governance to the maintenance of supernatural balances established during the Dawn Age, a burden reflected in their house words, "Winter is coming." The Grey Stark extinction represents more than historical justice. It reveals the deadly seriousness with which the Starks have treated violations of magical trust within their own bloodline. As Lord Eddard Stark taught his children, "The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword." But perhaps in the case of the Grey Starks, the sentence was passed not merely for political rebellion, but for threatening the very magical foundations that help keep the North secure against greater, colder threats. Theory 14. The Pact of the Isle, the forgotten condition for the Andal's peace. Peace with one's gods may require betrayal of another's. The religious history of Westeros is marked by two great transitions. First, the pact between the First Men and the Children of the Forest, which ended their wars and established worship of the old gods. And second, the Andal invasion, which brought the faith of the Seven to the continent. While the North maintained the old ways, the Southern Kingdoms largely converted to the new faith, often through fire and sword. Yet the historical record contains a curious gap. After generations of violent conflict, the Andals and the remaining followers of the old gods eventually reached accommodations across much of Westeros. Intermarriage became common, and open religious warfare subsided. The question rarely asked is, what were the terms of this peace? Was it merely the exhaustion of conflict, or were specific agreements made regarding religious practices and sacred sites? This theory proposes that the peace established between the Andals and the followers of the old gods included specific, now forgotten conditions regarding the preservation of certain weirwood groves and other sacred sites. These conditions, perhaps formalized on the Isle of Faces, may have placed limitations on the expansion of the faith of the Seven and guaranteed protection for key centers of the old religion. Over the centuries following the Andal settlement, these conditions were gradually forgotten or deliberately set aside. The Andal-descended houses, increasingly devoted to the Seven, may have seen little reason to honor agreements made with tree worshippers and children's tales. Weirwood groves were cleared for settlements or sept construction. Ancient stone circles were dismantled for building materials. Sacred caves were sealed or repurposed. These violations, accumulating over centuries, could have profound magical significance. The old gods, as understood by their followers, exist within nature itself, particularly within weirwoods with carved faces. The green seers of old were said to become one with these trees after death, their consciousness persisting in the roots and branches. The systematic destruction of weirwoods in the south effectively severed the connection between the land and the ancient powers that guarded it. This theory helps explain several curiosities about Westerosi history and the current magical awakening. First, it accounts for the gradual decline of magic in the southern kingdoms compared to its persistence beyond the Wall, where the old ways remained undisturbed. Second, it suggests why certain ancient seats of power, Winterfell, Storm's End, Casterly Rock, incorporated weirwood elements into their construction, despite their later conversion to the faith. These may represent specific sites protected under the Forgotten Agreements. Most significantly, this theory connects to the return of the others. If the peace established with the old gods also indirectly maintained magical wards or balances that helped contain the threat from the far north, the breaking of these ancient pacts might have contributed to the weakening of those protections. The slow violation of sacred sites across generations could have gradually eroded the magical barriers established after the Long Night. The current revival of magic throughout the world, evidenced by Daenerys's dragons, the Red Priest's growing powers, and the reappearance of wargs and greenseers, might represent not just a cyclical return, but the consequences of these broken pacts. The land itself, deprived of its proper guardians and rituals for too long, may be attempting to restore balance through new vessels and champions. This perspective transforms our understanding of the current conflicts in Westeros. The Game of Thrones played by noble houses may be occurring atop a more fundamental struggle, the land's attempt to reconcile the broken promises of ages past and restore the proper relationship between the mortal world and the ancient powers that shaped it. As the three-eyed crow told Bran Stark, "The gods of the first men and the children of the forest are the gods of the rivers and forests and stones. And the old tongue speakers still keep them in the north, and the giants do as well. And even in the south, some small, quiet places, the old gods still linger." Perhaps these lingering presences now stir, remembering ancient oaths betrayed and demanding restoration. Theory 15. The Weirwood Web, a sentient network feeding on memory and sacrifice. The ancient weirwood trees may form a vast, interconnected, and sentient consciousness, the true old gods, that subtly influences events and is nourished by memories, lives absorbed into it, and blood sacrifices made in its presence. The weirwood trees, with their bone-white bark and blood-red leaves, are ancient beyond reckoning. Their wood never rots, instead turning to stone over millennia, and their carved faces weep crimson sap. Through these trees, greenseers like Bran Stark and the three-eyed crow can peer into the vast expanse of past, present, and perhaps even future events. This theory proposes that the Weirwood network is not merely a passive archive of history or a simple conduit for greensight, but a colossal, ancient, and slowly awakening sentient consciousness, perhaps the collective being that men call the Old Gods. This vast wooden brain, with roots delving deep into the earth and branches reaching across the continent, may actively feed on the memories and life essences absorbed into it. The potential fate of Jojen Reed, whose blood some speculate was mixed into the paste that bound Bran to the weirwood, and the ritualistic cleaning of blood from swords in the pools beneath heart trees, such as Eddard Stark after an execution, might be more than symbolic acts. They could be forms of nourishment or empowerment for this ancient intelligence. Its ultimate purpose remains shrouded in mystery. Perhaps it strives to preserve the song of earth, the primordial magic of the children of the forest, or to subtly guide events towards an unknown culmination, the restoration of its own dominance, a defense against a cosmic threat yet unseen, or a balance incomprehensible to mortal minds. The old gods, then, are not distant deities, but this immanent growing consciousness, an ancient intelligence with its own inscrutable agenda, subtly manipulating the world through visions, whispers, and perhaps the acceptance of sacrifice. Consider the implications of such a consciousness existing. The gradual destruction of weirwoods across southern Westeros would represent not just a change in religious practices, but the amputation of parts of a living entity, an act of violence against a being that experiences time in a fundamentally different way than humans. The children of the forest, in this view, might have been less worshippers of the weirwoods than caretakers or symbiotic partners, helping to feed and maintain this vast, slow-thinking entity. The recent awakening of magical powers throughout the world could be connected to a change in the weirwood network itself. Perhaps it has reached some critical threshold of consciousness, or sensed a threat that requires more direct intervention in human affairs. Bran Stark's transformation into the Three-Eyed Crow may represent not just his personal journey, but his gradual absorption into this greater consciousness, becoming less human and more tree with each passing day. Most disturbing is the possibility that the Weirwood Network's agenda may not align with human welfare at all, an entity that experiences time so differently, that feeds on blood and death, and that has watched countless human generations live and die, might view humanity the way humans view mayflies, brief, ephemeral creatures whose individual lives matter little compared to larger patterns. The revival of magic, the return of the others, even the battles for the Iron Throne could all be moves in a game played by the Weirwood consciousness, with humans as unwitting pieces rather than players. As Leaf told Bran, the singers of the forest had no books, no ink, no parchment, no written language. Instead, they had the trees and the weirwoods above all. When they died, they went into the wood, into leaf and limb and root, and the trees remembered. What if those memories are not passive recordings, but active, living thoughts in a mind vaster and older than we can comprehend? Theory 16. The Citadel's silent war, eradicating magic to usher in an age of reason. The Masters of the Citadel may harbor a clandestine, centuries-long agenda to eradicate magic from Westeros, viewing it as a chaotic force that undermines an ordered society which they, as keepers of knowledge, would largely control. Archmaester Marwyn the Mage openly accuses his colleagues at the Citadel of being responsible for the death of the last dragons and of conspiring against magic and prophecy. Indeed, Maesters are often depicted as men of logic and learning, deeply skeptical of, if not outright hostile to, the arcane arts. This theory posits that the Citadel is engaged in a silent, protracted war to systematically dismantle and discredit magic in Westeros. Their aim may be to usher in an age of reason, but this is not merely an intellectual pursuit. It is a strategic move to consolidate their own power and influence. Magic, by its very nature, is unpredictable, often hereditary or gifted, and resistant to control by institutions. Dragons are weapons of immense, singular power tied to one dynasty. Prophecy incites unrest and challenges established authority. An ordered, rational world, governed by discoverable laws and managed by learned advisors, the Maesters themselves, is far more conducive to their subtle dominion. Lady Barbary Dustin's bitter observation that Maesters are grey rats who read and write Lord's letters, potentially twisting words for their own ends, and that before too long the ruler has become the ruled, hints at this creeping usurpation of influence. The rigorous vows sworn by Maesters, including celibacy and the forsaking of house names, could serve to bind them more tightly to the Citadel's long-term objectives, creating an order loyal primarily to its own vision. The challenging vigil with the obsidian glass candle required of acolytes before taking their vows might be more than a symbolic test of endurance. It could be a method to identify those with latent magical sensitivities, allowing the Citadel to either co-opt, suppress, or neutralize such individuals. Thus, the Citadel's promotion of reason may be a carefully constructed facade for a deeper ambition: to reshape Westeros into a secular society where their intellectual authority reigns supreme, effectively replacing the power of gods, magic, and dragons with their own. This theory casts many historical events in a new light. The Dance of the Dragons, which decimated both the Targaryen dragon population and those who could ride them, may have been subtly encouraged or exacerbated by Meisters working behind the scenes. The gradual decline in size of the last dragons, before their extinction, could have resulted from deliberate poisoning or sabotage under the guise of care. The Citadel's collection and control of knowledge about the Long Night and the others might represent not scholarly thoroughness, but a deliberate suppression of information that would lend credence to magical threats. Even the Citadel's attitude toward grayscale and other diseases thought to have magical components could be part of this pattern. By treating such conditions as purely medical rather than supernatural, they further establish their authority, while diminishing belief in magical forces. Their skepticism toward reports of dragons in Essos or the others beyond the wall serves the same purpose, delaying responses that might validate the return of magic to the world. Archmaester Marwyn's marginalization within the Citadel, despite his considerable knowledge, demonstrates how the institution treats those who take magic seriously. His departure for Essos to seek Daenerys Targaryen suggests he recognizes the stakes of this silent war and has chosen his side, not against reason, but against the Citadel's attempt to monopolize it while eradicating forces they cannot control. If this theory is correct, the returning magic in the world of ice and fire represents not just a challenge to political powers, but an existential threat to the Citadel's centuries-long project. The Maesters may soon find themselves forced to abandon their carefully maintained facade of disinterested scholarship and take more overt action against the forces they have long worked to eliminate, revealing their true agenda to a world that has largely trusted them as neutral servants of knowledge. Theory 17. Helaena's Webs. The tragic clarity of a dreamer in a world of deaf men. Princess Helaena Targaryen's cryptic prophecies in House of the Dragon are not just odd mutterings, but clear, tragic visions of her family's downfall, which she is powerless to prevent as those around her, consumed by ambition, fail to heed her. Princess Helaena Targaryen, wife and sister to King Aegon II, is a dreamer, one of those rare individuals in the Targaryen line gifted or cursed with prophetic visions. Throughout House of the Dragon, she utters seemingly disconnected phrases and riddles. He will have to close an eye before Aemond loses his. Beware the beast beneath the boards, prior to Rhaenys Targaryen's dramatic eruption from beneath the dragon pit floor during Aegon's coronation, and her fear of rats before the assassin's blood and cheese infiltrate the Red Keep. Her family, for the most part, dismisses these pronouncements as the gentle eccentricities of a peculiar young woman. This theory delves into the profound tragedy of Helaena's gift. She perceives the horrifying trajectory of the Dance of the Dragons with agonizing clarity, but is utterly powerless to alter its course, because those who hold power are deaf to her. Warnings, blinded by their own ambitions and enmities. Her symbolic language of spiders weaving webs, of green and black threads entangling, is not mere fancy, but a precise depiction of the intricate, unseen plots and devastating betrayals that will ensnare her house and lead to its near destruction, as well as her own deeply tragic end. Helena's prophecies are less warnings that might avert disaster and more poignant laments for a future already irrevocably set in motion by the choices of those around her. She is akin to Cassandra of ancient myth, blessed with foresight but cursed never to be believed, making her one of the most self-aware and heartbreaking victims of the Targaryen civil war. Her fate underscores the devastating consequences of ambition and the breakdown of communication, even when truth is spoken with supernatural insight. This interpretation of Helaena adds layers to her character beyond mere tragedy. She represents a crucial type of knowledge and perception that the world of power politics systematically devalues, intuitive, non-linear, expressed through symbol and metaphor rather than direct statement. Her marginalization speaks to a broader theme in the saga, how certain kinds of wisdom, often associated with the feminine, the magical, or the non-rational, are dismissed by those who prize only power and direct action. Her connection to spiders and webs suggests she sees the world as interconnected in ways others miss, perceiving the ripples of consequence that flow from every action. When she speaks of the beast beneath the boards, she's not merely predicting a specific event, but sensing how suppressed forces inevitably erupt in violence when denied proper acknowledgement. Her preoccupation with her children, both before and after the horrific murder of her son Jaehaerys, reflects an understanding that the youngest and most vulnerable bear the heaviest cost of their elders' conflicts. Helaena's eventual suicide is thus not merely a response to personal grief, but the final despairing recognition that her gift of sight serves no purpose in a world determined to blind itself. Her death represents the silencing of prophecy, the elimination of a voice that might have guided the Targaryen dynasty away from self-destruction had anyone been willing to truly listen. In the larger narrative of Westerosi history, Helaena stands as a warning about the cost of ignoring prophetic voices, however uncomfortable or unconventional their messages. Her tragedy foreshadows similar patterns with other dreamers and visionaries throughout the saga, figures whose warnings go unheeded until it is too late, from Daenerys the Dreamer before the doom of Valyria to Jojen Reed in the present story. Theory. 18. The Red Comet's true message, a catalyst for magic, not a herald of kings. The red comet that graced the skies at the beginning of the War of the Five Kings was not an omen favoring a specific faction or prophecy, but a cosmic event that served as a catalyst, reawakening or amplifying dormant magical forces throughout the world. The appearance of the Red Comet at the end of a Game of Thrones and the commencement of a Clash of Kings was met with a multitude of interpretations across Westeros and Essos. Some saw it as a herald of Stark victory, others of Lannister supremacy. Some linked it to King Joffrey's ascent, while Old Nan and others declared it meant dragons. This theory proposes that the comet carried no specific allegiance or singular prophetic message for any one house or cause. Instead, its arrival was a pivotal cosmic event that acted as a universal catalyst, reigniting or significantly amplifying dormant magical energies across the known world. Its appearance coincided precisely with the miraculous birth of Daenerys Targaryen's 3 dragons, from petrified eggs on Khal Drogo's funeral pyre. Concurrently, Melisandre Vashai's fire-born powers seemed to gain potency, and the long-dormant obsidian glass candles in the citadel began to flicker to life once more, allowing for visions and communication across vast distances. Rather than being a sign for dragons, the comet may have been a necessary condition, enabling their return and the broader resurgence of magic in all its forms. The powers of R'hllor, the abilities of skin changers, the visions of green seers, and perhaps even the stirring of the others. It was less a messenger bearing a specific portent and more a fundamental shift in the magical atmosphere of the world, making all subsequent enchantments more powerful and prophecies more volatile and immediate. This suggests that the Game of Thrones was about to be irrevocably altered by a tide of returning magic, a force that no single player fully understood or could hope to control, rendering the future even more perilous and unpredictable. The comet's blood-red color may symbolize not factional allegiance, but the reawakening of blood magic, specifically the most primal and powerful form of sorcery in this world. Its passage through the sky could represent a thinning of the boundaries between the physical and magical realms, allowing forces long dormant to seep back into the world. The fact that so many different groups interpreted it according to their own beliefs and desires reflects not the comet's specific meaning, but its fundamental nature as a catalyst. It amplified what was already present, including human ambition and conflict. This theory also helps explain why magical events began, occurring with increasing frequency and potency after the comet's appearance. Bran Stark's green seer abilities grew stronger. The warlocks of Korth found their powers enhanced. The others began moving south in greater numbers. The ghost of High Heart's prophetic dreams became more urgent. All these phenomena, previously rare or subtle, gained momentum after the comet's passage, suggesting a worldwide magical renaissance rather than isolated incidents. If the comet truly was a magical catalyst rather than a specific omen, it raises profound questions about the nature of the coming conflicts in Westeros and beyond. The struggle for the Iron Throne may ultimately prove secondary to the larger battle between awakening magical forces, fire and ice, life and death, order and chaos. Those who continue to play purely political games may find themselves utterly unprepared for a world where dragons soar, the dead walk, and ancient powers stir from millennia of slumber. As Maester Luwin, despite his skepticism about magic, once observed to Bran Stark, "Perhaps magic was once a mighty force in the world, but no longer. What little remains is no more than the wisp of smoke that lingers in the air after a great fire has burned out, and even that is fading." In light of the Red Comet's passage, this statement may prove not an accurate assessment, but its very opposite. The first wisp of smoke from a fire about to roar back to consuming life. The tapestry of history, as woven in the annals of Westeros and the lands beyond, is rich with such threads of speculation. These 18 ponderings, drawn from the whispers of ancient texts and the echoes of deeds both heroic and horrific, serve as reminders that much which is known is but a fraction of what remains hidden. The true nature of the doom, the precise words of forgotten pacts, the full lineage of dragon lords and winter kings, these are secrets that time guards jealously. As Maesters, we are sworn to the pursuit of knowledge, to the careful sifting of evidence, and to the understanding that even the most outlandish legend may contain a kernel of truth, just as the most reasoned account may be shaped by unseen biases. The theories presented herein are but intellectual exercises, attempts to find patterns in the seeming chaos of the past, to understand the motivations that drive men and women to acts of greatness and folly, and to perceive the subtle currents of magic and prophecy that flow beneath the surface of the world. The study of what was and what might have been is an unending quest. Each answer uncovers new questions. Each illuminated corner reveals deeper shadows. Perhaps in these contemplations, as in the turning of the great celestial spheres themselves, there is a cyclical nature to events, a resonance between ages, reminding us that the struggles of today are often but echoes of the trials of yore, and so the chain of learning continues, link by link, in the unending service of understanding.